Thank you, Robert, and thank you for your introduction. And yes, I think the title says it all, really. There's a strategy there, and it's something we need to pay attention to. And my intention is to talk you through some of the aspects that could be really quite defining in terms of where we all go, those of us in the room, in terms of our future, individually and collectively. So it came out in February, so it is new to us since our last conference. This is the front cover, and it is the plan that our governments have for us in terms of dealing with invasive non-native species in Britain. Looking at the vision taken from the strategy, I'll call it the strategy, and where there's bold in text, that's mine. I've sort of bolded it. So here we're looking at something which in many respects could describe what we do in terms of the protection that we're trying to afford to the environment around us, be it urban or the sort of wider environment. And particularly to stress the partnership element that government is looking for in terms of government, voluntary organisations, non-governmental organisations, researchers, businesses and the public. So I think fairly clearly it's something we need to pay attention to and see where we fit in. So what I'd like to do is, first of all, let's have a look and see what the ministers say about the strategy. Good start. I'd like then to explain the approaches that I've taken in terms of the way in which we can have a look at it. And there's the Monty Python approach and there's the JFK approach. And then look at the aims and key outcomes. Where do we fit in with that? Does that sort of chime with what we do? And then, well, yeah, we're familiar with these next headings: prevention, surveillance, rapid response, prioritising, risk management, and management. These are all key sections within the strategy, and ones that we would certainly recognise initially as part of what we do. And then lastly, I'll give a bit of a recap. So in terms of the ministers, they're looking to refresh the strategy. This is the sort of second main strategy that there's been. The previous strategy ran from 2008. Interestingly, they've identified that public awareness over this issue has increased in terms of prioritising biodiversity and green recovery. Something we can fit into, maybe think more about in terms of the work that we do. It ensures that Great Britain continues to demonstrate both nationally and internationally. Great in terms of our conference that we have an international element to it. We need to perhaps grow that somewhat. But overall, we need to take, again, concerted action, everybody sort of working together in order to deal with the problem. We know how to go about it. We know what we need to do. We know how to do it. And we have got sort of robust measures that we can put into place. I was just sort of lapsed into we, but it's actually the government sees that we have this capability, capacity and competence, but so do we. The refresh strategy, as the ministers say, builds on successes of previous years and sets out a series of ambitions. Well, we've been going, 10 years or so, as Steve was saying, and we have some ambitions, etc., in these directions. So, again, strong partnerships is what they're looking for between government, voluntary organisations, NGOs, researchers, businesses, and the public. And I put the PCA logo on. I don't know whether you can see it, but when you read the strategy, that's rather where we sit. We're not very obvious within the strategy, and that's something that I need to sort of talk a little bit more about. And that looks better. So, you know, we need to sort of move to a somewhat more integrated role and a more obvious role that we can use, as I say, in terms of going forward. So, two approaches: the Monty Python approach. That's very much based on what have the Romans ever done for us, which was Reg in John Cleese in the Life of Brian. And I have to be honest, reading through the strategy first time, I was somewhat of a Reg type mentality in terms of being sort of in that sort of situation. But as Reg found out that actually the Romans, aqueducts, the roads, sanitation, you know, he'd got it wrong a bit. He needed to pay a bit more attention to what the Romans were actually doing in order to make sure he didn't lose out. But as somebody pointed out to me yesterday evening, also don't forget that the Romans did give us rabbits. The other approach, though, is the JFK approach. So ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. And I think that is important as well. We are part of the response to invasive species. From our point of view, that's obviously in terms of the plant side of things, but it's a key part. And we need to look to how we can play our role in helping the governments of the UK to deliver the strategy. So those are two approaches that I can sort of lean on as I go through and talk you through the aims first of all. Again, what we would expect: minimising the risk of introduction and establishment, and reducing the negative impacts of invasive species, again, through a strong partnership approach. And that just follows the now well-established hierarchy of prevention, detection, rapid response, and so on, which we're really quite familiar with. Interesting, though, to have a look at the key outcomes. What's the expectation by the time we get to 2030 in terms of what will have been achieved? A reduction in establishment of invasive species by at least 50% compared to 2000. That's the sort of prevention side. In terms of surveillance and monitoring, significantly improving our ability to detect and respond to these species. To actually use the eradicate word and also control and contain invasive species, looking to prioritise those that have a higher likelihood of success. Overall, sort of the management context. Additionally, and whereas I think we do quite well in terms of this list from the point of view of those of us who are here today at the conference, we don't do quite so well in terms of the prioritisation of species. We haven't really been involved in the risk assessments of plant species that the Non-Native Species Secretariat coordinate. We have definitely started, and for a while now, been engaged in researching priorities in terms of the evidence underpinning the work that we do. We need to improve our role, I guess, in terms of raising awareness. That is something we can do with our clients in terms of the breadth of invasive species work that needs to be done, but also in terms of the sort of wider awareness raising, perhaps more through nature recovery schemes, through environmental management grants and funding that are becoming available. And also to improve coordination of actions. Again, part of a role that we could extend. A conference is a great example of bringing people together from different parts of our world of invasive plants and weeds. We could perhaps do a little bit more outside of the conference in terms of that side of things. So prevention, here are the key actions, and by the way, one of the things you really ought to do if you haven't looked through the strategy is when you get that quiet moment, well, I know they don't come that often, so make a quiet moment and do have a look through the strategy. It's readily available on the gov.uk site. And you'll see a whole series of key actions. I've just picked out a few that I felt were relevant in terms of pathway action plans. Again, not something we've been involved in, but we know all about pathways and we know they're important, and perhaps we should be rather more involved in developing future pathway action plans. Looking to support and encourage the effective implementation and delivery of these pathway action plans, and pulling our weight, if you like, in terms of looking to, in a concerted effort, in terms of plants that have been identified and the pathway action plans associated with them. But also fostering and developing expertise and capacity in, again, delivering contingency responses across government and relevant stakeholders. We operate obviously in terms of what our clients are asking us to do in the main. Perhaps we should also be looking at the bigger picture in terms of how we fit in developing responses to some of these more national issues in a sort of more joined up way. We do rather fail when it comes to surveillance and our sort of records and so on, and there are probably quite good reasons for that. But I've circled the contributors to data collection, and we're not on the list. So that's one maybe we should have a look at. Given the number of us who are involved out there on a day-to-day basis in terms of our teams, individuals working, we should be contributing thousands of records to the national database in terms of invasive species, not just where we find them, but also where we have managed to deal with them and remove them. All of this information should be in the national database, and it really is not. But rapid response, we certainly should recognise that as important. It's something we do on a fairly regular basis. But again, we're not linked into the programme board, which has overseen the development of the rapid response protocol. It's going to be reconvened. Will we be able to be, as part of the rapid response working group, inputting our expertise in terms of how we see responding to invasive species when they're causing trouble? Are we engaging with industry and NGOs to define their roles? Again, aspects that we could have a look at the strategy in more detail. Whilst I pointed out that the sector that is here sort of represented today is probably rather poorly represented in the strategy, I think you will be surprised just to see how much of an emphasis is placed on tackling established invasive species through local action and the use of voluntary groups. There are 50 local action groups. This is a case study taken from the strategy, dealing with the sort of reduction in the risks of impacts associated with invasive species, and so on. You can read that the sort of the way in which that has been promoted. Sort of examples here of some volunteers dealing with American skunk cabbage. So government putting quite considerable emphasis on the voluntary sector and its role within invasive species management is something that we need to have a think about and look at the key actions that come under this particular heading, where there needs to be support for national and regional scale coordination, where we should be developing greater cooperation, interestingly, between INS experts, which I think very much is what we are, and the local action groups, So that is seen as something that needs to happen, and to seek ways of ensuring that invasive species management is included in relevant initiatives. Briefly mentioned earlier, the environment management schemes, the agricultural agri-environment schemes, nature recovery schemes. All of these have an invasive species dimension to them, which for us really is a good opportunity. Lastly, something that we recognise, but I fear we're probably not that good at, making sure that we do the restoration, the revegetation after we've done our work. It's here in the strategy. We should be making sure we at least get our own house well in order, and also encourage sort of wider use of revegetation and so on. Prioritisation and risk management, I briefly touched on already. We need to engage more in terms of our expertise and the way in which it can be used to determine those species that do sort of pose the most risk, where we need to develop risk analysis mechanisms, something that we have spent time and listened to presentation on last year. So we're on the right lines. We need to be moving in that direction. And then evidence. Evidence is sort of equals to sort of the research side of things, looking at the impact on invasive species, looking at pathways, looking at rapid responses, and longer term control and eradication. All areas I think we would recognise that, yeah, we do need to learn more. We do need to look at the evidence in order to have a sort of basis to build on. And a series of key actions there, which again gives us the opportunity to engage with the research working group to look at opportunities and partnerships, seeking to collaborate internationally. To extend the work we're doing in terms of understanding what's going on in other parts of the world and how that relates to ourselves and what we're doing, and to encourage practitioners to record, report and share good practice. Again, something that we have done and no doubt we'll do more of. So very much on the right sort of lines, and progress already being made. So finally, let me just run through some John Cleese points and some JFK points. So for me, the strategy, and Robert described it as for us a potential marketing strategy, but it certainly provides an opportunity for us to think about where our work is taking us, what we need to do in order to optimize the future. So it certainly provides opportunities. It's an invitation from government in many respects to engage with us. It's a basis for us to provide advice to our clients, those who we work with, the projects that we work on. I've just jotted down some of the sort of things that we could be talking to our clients a little bit more about in terms of preventative measures, maybe for a local authority, setting up rapid response capability with a national highways area, looking at coordinating control programs for giant rhubarb in the River Witham catchment, as a sort of coordinated approach that we could be taking initiative on. Horizon scanning for a water company in terms of its link to rapid response and opportunities to engage in researching into new developments. And we do a lot of this already. There's a good example yesterday on the examination preparation training that I was doing of a member just doing that for Worcestershire County Council. We're working in AECOM in terms of working with National Highways, who are very keen to have a sort of rapid response horizon scanning. With rivers, we have members who are engaging more in the aquatic aspect, but there are a whole range of habitats that we could be working in. Again, my own company actually next week is going to receive a Green Apple Award for working with the water company in terms of dealing with invasive species and opportunities for research. We have Florum, complete weed control, Japanese knotweed treatment, etc. all with relationships with universities from Leeds through to the University of Galway. So we are doing these sorts of things. We need to direct them and make sure they fit into this strategy and work harder to ensure we get recognition for what we do. We're a workforce of around about, I guess, about 1,000 specialists across the UK and beyond. But I'm not sure this is properly recognised in terms of what we do and what we could do. And certainly we should think about how we can pull our weight more in terms of that opportunity that we've identified. We need to appreciate that our outward face can be a little bit confusing. Our outward face, the side of the van, the research focus, etc., is understandably somewhat preoccupied with Japanese knotweed. However, we've learned a huge amount from our work on Japanese knotweed, both our work in terms of dealing with it, but understanding the plant and plants and invasive species. And now is a really good opportunity to apply that to, well, there are at least 40 or 50 other species out there that we need to get stuck into. And given recent experience of an invasive organism, admittedly it was a very tiny one that posed a global threat, would we really have wanted to have relied primarily on the voluntary sector to deal with it? JFK points. Invasive weed sector could engage more assertively with a strategy. I hope I've identified that opportunity. We could join working groups, program boards, country fora. We could attend the 20th DEFRA Annual Invasive Non-Native Stakeholder Forum next year, be represented there, contribute to GB risk assessments, explore how to engage with local action groups, contribute to our invasive plant records to a national database, work towards a better balance in the work that we undertake, all plant species and obviously just Japanese knotweed, and use the PCA to provide the necessary sort of code of practice, sort of develop from, as I say, our experience and expertise and what we've achieved in terms of Japanese knotweed. And then finally, the last three JFK points. Encouragement to do better in certain areas, particularly revegetation and restoration. There's potentially a lot of work that could then lead into other aspects of revegetation and restoration. An incentive, the strategy provides an incentive to be prepared to deal with new species in new habitats, rhododendron in woodlands, Japanese knotweed, Japanese rose rather in sand dunes, uplands, lowlands, agri-environment schemes, and so on. And then very finally, this creates a sort of basis, I've said here, basis for careers in invasive weed management. But it's sort of an investment using the strategy for us to be going into the future with a little bit of structure and a direction that hopefully will build on where we are and where indeed we might be able to get to. So, thank you very much.